Good morning and welcome to this session of Business Breeders, a live webinar series hosted by Goodman Group at Brock University. My name is Abdul Rahimi and it's my distinct pleasure to serve as the Director of Goodman Group at the Goodman School of Business. Goodman Group is a community-focused learning and development services provider where we offer a number of professional development certificates, executive education, consulting services, and startup support. It's my pleasure to welcome you all joining us today's sessions as you take a break with us by taking part in this webinar series. This webinar series aims to provide 45-minute breathers filled with insightful discussions on timely topics that are relevant to businesses and everyday lives, led by our award-winning faculty from Brock University and leading industry experts, encouraging thoughtful debates, keeping us feeling connected all together. This webinar series is hosted on Wednesdays from 11 to 11:45. In a moment, I'll hand today's session and screen over to Nick Pollice, who will lead today's discussion, who will speak for about 30 minutes, and then there will be some time to answer any other questions that you may pose at the time of registration. As well, you may pose your question during the live session in the chat feature, which is open now. You may also pose your questions and comments through Twitter, and you can tweet at GSB Goodman Group, all one word. That's at GSB Goodman Group, all one word. You can tweet your comments and questions live as you would have done so for the previous sessions as well, for those of you that are returning for the session. At the end of this webinar, I will provide details on how you may access today's webinar recording as well. Now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce today's webinar. That's Nick Pollice, who has been working as a consultant since 1989 when he co-founded the Pollice Management Consulting Group. It's a full-service consulting, facilitation, and conflict management organization. As a professional consultant, presenter, and facilitator since 1986, Nick has a busy practice which practically and realistically has assisted many employees from public and private sectors across North American organizations, mainly focusing in the art of operations management, conflict resolution, mediation, emotional intelligence, and negotiation. During a 25-year career in the industry, 22 of which were in the food industry, Nick has held senior positions in industrial engineering, manufacturing, logistics, and human resources. With extensive experience in leading and managing in operations environment, Nick and his business unit consistently met targeted commitments. So you can tell Nick has had a very rich and filling experience, and he also holds numerous certifications in the areas of his practice. His bio is long, but I've tried to truncate it here so that we have more time to hear from Nick and to answer your questions. So Nick, over to you. Welcome to today's session.
Thank you, Abdul. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Cassie Price for also allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. It's an honor and a privilege for me as a Brock alumnus to be with you today to talk a little bit about leadership post-COVID, practical leadership and communication strategies for success. Just to quickly reiterate what Abdul said, my name is Nick Pollice. I'm a management consultant, have been since 1989, and my company basically does the following. We provide customized training, facilitation, strategic planning services, and mediation services to our clients in a swift and professional manner so they can get on with their business. That's all I'll say about my organization. We've been in business since 1989. And you can look us up on the website at www.pollicemanagement.com if you wish. Since we're going to talk a little bit about leadership post-COVID, I thought I'd give you some opportunity to look at the session goals. Number one, I want to talk to you about how you might like to talk to your employees as they come back into the workplace. Distinguish the difference between change and transition. And from a corporate standpoint, change is one thing. From a psychological standpoint, a human standpoint, transition is totally different. And they do meet. And the true test of a leader is to distinguish between the two. Also, I'm going to introduce you to the William Bridges model, which is a three-stage transition model, which I think you'll find very enjoyable and very apropos to today's environment. And last but not least, I'll leave plenty of time for questions, answers, comments, and concerns. Now, since we're going to talk a little bit about leadership post-COVID, and I talk about practical leadership and communication strategies for success, maybe we should define what leadership and communication is, since it is the underlying elements to the presentation. I'd like to talk to you about two gentlemen, Dr. Martin Luther King and past President Barack Obama, as to how they led and communicated. I found these two people to be very wise leaders and very effective communicators. Dr. King talked about leadership as being a process of providing guidance and direction through sound communication. What does that definition mean to us today? Well, there's a couple leadership principles that I think are important for us as leaders as people come back into the workplace that we may wish to emphasize. Number one is honesty. It is right to be honest. Tell people the truth. Tell them the truth with compassion, but be open and honest and transparent with them. Number two, all communication ought to be fact-based. Yes, you can formulate your opinions based on fact, but don't make stuff up. Too many leaders today say, well, this can happen and that can happen. All kinds of things can happen. The bottom line is people aren't interested in that as much as they are interested in fact-based communication. So all your communication ought to be based on facts. Yes, you could say it's also based on the facts. You have an opinion, but you have to decipher between the two. Number three, have empathy. We hear the term CEO, the Chief Executive Officer. CEO now stands for Chief Empathy Officer. People are suffering a great amount of stress and anxiety in their life outside of work. These are extrinsic factors. Could be money challenges, could be problems with their kids going to school, what to do with them, could be babysitting, whatever the case may be. Those are challenges that are coming right into the workplace. And we as leaders have to acknowledge the fact that there is a certain amount of stress and anxiety in people's lives, especially people who have parents that are older that may be suffering some of the symptoms of COVID. There's a lot of things happening with people right now. Don't tell people, be happy you got a job, because that's only going to bring them from here down to here. That's not where we want them. Number four, be flexible. Flexibility is key. Nothing is predetermined now. We are in a state of flex, so flexibility in the way we do our job. The things that we used to do are now gone. We have to be a little bit more flexible in terms of our thinking pattern. Number five is humility. Have some humility. Let people take the lead. Give them direction, then let them do their job. Last but not least, be an active listener, which means be an active thinker. Listen to what people are saying. Ask good, poignant questions. Answer the questions to the best of your ability. If you can't answer them, you let them know. I don't know the answer. I'll get back to you. Leadership principles, Leadership 101. Now let's combine that with communication. Barack Obama talked a little bit about communication when he said communication is a process of imparting or exchanging thoughts and information and opinions. Well, how does that relate to post-COVID? Communication principles. Communication needs to be simple and easy to understand, using the KISS principle. Keep it straight and simple. Get to the point. Tell people what they need to know. Let them do their job. Follow up on a regular basis. Empathetic intelligence. Be empathetic towards people, towards their struggles. Don't be afraid to listen to people, and don't be afraid to give them direction in terms of where they should go if the problems are over and above what you could solve. And when I talk about empathy, maybe you start your work at 8 and somebody needs to start at 8:30. Only because they need to start at 8:30 because there's something that they have to do with their kids or with their parents Have some empathy. And last but not least, target your message. Far too often, as people are coming back into the workplace, most organizations, most leaders are having these huddle board meetings where they get 20 people together and everybody gets the same message. A lot of times people don't need all that information. It's great to give out general information that way, but specific information is going to be need. You ought to consider doing it one-on-one or one-on-two. Target your message, let people know what they need to know, and get out of the way, let them do their job. This means it's all about leadership by walking around. You don't have time to be spending in your office. You've got to be having open dialogue with people. So we talk about leadership, we talk about communication. How does this impact the transition model? Well, the first thing the transition model talks about, that we're going to talk about, is change and transition. You see, change is situational, while transition is somewhat psychological. As leaders, we manage change, we understand change, and we attempt to model change through stability, flexibility, and mental structure. We understand that change is necessary in order for organizations to grow, in order for organizations to develop. Now, people understand change through organizational structure, through changes in roles, responsibilities, policies, procedures, protocol. They see change as being structural, and they accept change as a principle of human nature because they're mostly aware of the fact that they have little or no choice. But what we as leaders ought to recognize is that the other part of change is transition. And the transition period is somewhat critical because we are in unprecedented times. We face unstructured, undefined problems, and nobody can tell me where we're going to be 6 months from now. We don't know that. That's why we call it not the new normal, we call it the now normal. And that impacts people's ability because if you look at the 6 human basic needs, which are certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, contribution, the number one need is the need of certainty. And when people aren't certain, that impacts negatively the survival skills, and that's where people are when they're in the transition stage. That's why I talked about transition is psychological. In order to treat people equally, you have to treat them differently because they are. They're very different, and they're at different stages. Hence, looking at change and transition, we talk a little bit about the 3-stage transition model that was made popular by William Bridges back in the 70s. One of the things that I did is I invested 22, 23 years at E.D. Smith's, and I went through their management training program. And every management training program, whether you be a team leader, a supervisor, a superintendent, manager, director, vice president, everybody went through the William Bridges transition model. And as you got promoted up the ladder, you got exposed to it even more and more and more. You started off in a day training all the way up to a 5-day training model. And we were lucky enough to have William Bridges himself come into E.D. Smith in Winona when I was a young manager coming through, and he actually taught the program with some of his associates. And we didn't realize how important this was, but he said this, is that you will use this model in a crisis situation, no matter what the crisis is, whether it be with shortages of materials, supply chain interruptions, changes in technology, changes in people, customer demands, whatever the case may be, they're all viewed as organizational crises. And he talked a little bit about the first part about ending and letting go. Number 2 was managing the neutral zone. And number 3 was the new beginning. Let's break this down and talk a little bit about how it impacts us and our ability to provide leadership post-COVID. Letting go piece, building relationships to get the job done are so important. This is a part of ending and letting go where we got some confusion. People have reservations. They're somewhat frustrated. They're in a state of denial. If you look at it, because of certainty, people can go down one of two paths. They can go down path number one, which is fear, helplessness, victimization, panic, or blame, or they can go down path number two, which is ability to make a contribution, engagement, gratefulness, self-actualization, and appreciation. We'd like them all to go down path number two, but that can't always happen. People usually start in path number one. So the ending and letting go piece is highlighted by a couple of characteristics. As a leader, define what is over, what is not over. The way we used to do things before and the way we do things now, there's a difference. We have to be able to explain what those differences are and why they exist in the minds of the people, because again, the number one human basic need is that of certainty. Identify new expectations, responsibilities, and accountabilities. Jobs are going to change. The way we did things on March the 12th is not the same way we're going to be doing things on September the 1st because of things outside of our control. These are factors that we have virtually no control over. Number three, educate your team members about the future and how their ability, skill, and knowledge impacts that future. I call that the ask principle. People have a certain amount of abilities, they have a certain amount of skills, certain amount of knowledge. Let's capitalize on that opportunity and put people in a position to succeed, not in a position to fail. And that comes back to that empathy, using empathetic intelligence. Be somewhat empathetic as we create this new beginning, or as we create the ending and letting go. Prepare your team members for future tasks. The future is going to come unannounced. Change is quick. Sometimes it's very quick, and it's constant, and it always starts something new, whether it be internal and external. We have to condition people's minds to forget the past. We're living in the present right now. And there's no such thing from a leadership point of view as long-term strategic planning. Our long-term strategic plan is no more than a month. In most cases, we're talking 2 or 3 weeks. We just want to get by right now. I don't need the perfect job. I need the job to be complete and to the best of that individual's ability based on the best information available at the time. Speak to social distancing, personal protective equipment, good hygiene. People used to work very close. Now they're 6 to 8 feet apart. We used to maybe run, if we're running a plant or a manufacturing facility, maybe we were able to do things in one shift. Now we're going to do 2 shifts. We're going to do a day shift. We're going to do an afternoon shift. It's probably going to add to our costs, but it's just the way it is right now in order to fulfill the requirements that our customers need. So we speak and practice social distancing. Maybe coffee breaks are different. Instead of going at 10 o'clock, some people go at 10, some go at 10:15, some go at 10:30. There's going to be those changes. Stay connected with furloughed employees. We have a number of employees that are still not back at work and may not be getting back to work till January. So keep them in the loop. Make sure you keep them abreast of all the situations and everything that's happening. Follow up with them on a regular basis. Don't forget about them. Remember, people fear what they don't understand. And there's going to be that element of ending and letting go. These are 6 or 7 things that we can do to ensure some type of remedial success along the way. And if we do that right, we can enter a phase of managing the neutral zone, making that transition that is still going to have some anxiety, There's still going to be some resistance, but there's also that sense of optimism now, the excitement and the anticipation and the opportunity for innovation. People are going to start transitioning after 3 or 4 months into something that is they think might be the new norm, but you know as a leader, it's probably still the now norm because the norm is yet to be defined. Provide consistent and timely feedback with people on a regular basis. Keep all team members in the information loop. If you know something's coming down the pipe, make sure you get them the information and get them the information that they need to know, which basically means we have a full-time people-sitting job. Had an opportunity yesterday to talk to a manager, and he said to me, he says, well, Nick, he said, I'm not in the babysitting business. I don't have time for this stuff. I got a job to do. And I said to him, Ralph, I'm not saying you're a babysitter, but you are a people sitter. It's just that the people aren't 3 years old, they're 43 years old. You need to let them know and keep them informed. Well, I can't make that a priority. You need to make it a priority because it goes back to that certainty piece. It goes back to that connection piece. It goes back to that significant piece. Those are 4 of the 6 basic needs that information loop provides on a regular basis. Focus on short-term goals. Short-term goals, this is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing this week. Maybe if you're a real long-term strategic thinker, this is what we're doing this month. But usually it's day to day, week to week. Right now, we want to survive, and we want to survive in the most efficient way possible. Celebrate wins no matter how small they are. People need to know that they're part of a solution. They're part of a bigger thing. Because if they don't feel like they're part of a solution, they're going to feel like they're part of a problem. A problem what is yet to be defined and is yet to be created. But I'll tell you this, if they're not part of a solution, they're going to think of problems that they're part of. And we don't want that. We want people to focus on success. Also maintain anchors in work practices as much as possible. If you got into work at 8:30, continue to go to work at 8:30. If you had a coffee at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, have your coffee at 9 or 10 o'clock. If you always went out in the office to talk to people at 10 o'clock, go at 9 o'clock, go at 10 o'clock, go at 11 o'clock. Maintain the anchor, expand it. You don't have to change everything you do, but be prepared to change, be flexible. And don't expect perfection. We don't need perfection. We need completion. Completion is key because if we emphasize perfection, we're going to create confusion. Confusion is counterproductive to people's excitement and is directly proportional to people's anxiety and their resistance. Completion will do nicely. We'll worry about perfection later. Look for opportunities amidst the confusion. What can we do better? Or what can we improve? Bite-sized, digestible chunks. Managing that transition. And all people are going to get into that. The transition curve, if you look at the change curve, that was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's curve. You notice the curve goes down and it comes back up. Well, that part of the curve that goes down is known as the valley of despair. People feel somewhat victimized. They're in the transition right now. But we know as leaders, the valley of despair can quickly become the valley of death. Because if people stay in that down spiral too long, it becomes the culture of the organization. It becomes the poor me, the victimization piece. We can't live with that because we can't get to the next level, which is that exploration and commitment piece, which basically when people are feeling lost, that people are feeling lost and in need of direction in the neutral zone, Be cognizant of that, because communication is a key to success. If we're not cognizant of that, we're never going to get to the new beginning, which is the nuances of the transition. And when we talk about nuances of the transition, we're talking about people being relieved a little bit. We're talking about that piece there, people are somewhat unsure of themselves, now starts to go down, and people's confidence starts coming up. And when that happens, there's a higher level of energy. There's more of an opportunity for learning. There's a higher level of exploration and commitment. It's all part of that transition, which we call as being psychological. It's got nothing to do with change. Change is structural. It's situational. We're talking about transition here. Leverage the moment. And you look at leveraging the moment. I was reading an article not too long ago about Best Buy, what they've done. I've always known Best Buy as being an electronics place. Now they are the biggest provider of audio, visual, electronics, and medical equipment to retirement homes, long-term facility homes, in terms of respirators. They use the Geek Squad to go in and service all their equipment and update the equipment in a number of places, a number of retirement homes and old age homes throughout Ontario and throughout parts of the United States. They transitioned from being a provider to being a provider in a whole new, different market. Leverage the moment. I'm not saying you go out there and explore new markets. Leverage the moment in terms of people's growth and development. Provide them with opportunities to capitalize on their ability, skill, and knowledge, because not everybody's going to come back to the workplace. If you believe what the Angus Reid poll says, back in May, 30% of all people, when we come out of this in some type of new normal, what that is, they estimate that 30% of all people will be working off-site, will be working at home off-site. That's a change, because prior to March the 13th, 12% of all people, who were mostly salespeople, were working off-site. This is an 18% increase, or 18% more people will be working virtually, where 30% of all people will be coming back to work and actually being in the situation of the workplace, and 40% of all people, as of January the 1st, will be working 1 or 2 days at work and 3 or 4 days off-site. That's a whole new change. I wrote a paper in August on developing the post-pandemic workforce, the now normal, and I use those numbers. The way we lead people to prior to COVID, to the way we provide leadership and management skills to people post-COVID, are going to be totally different. They're going to be totally different. And each company is going to adapt to the nuances differently. These are the nuances of transition, depending on customer demands, depending on the organization. Reinforce the now normal. Live in the present. Don't live in the past. Don't live in the future. Live in the present. Get the job done to the best of your ability and move forward. That's what the now normal is. It's not the new normal. It's what is now. We manage to what we have now. The book of Eckhart Tolle, The New Beginnings, Tolle hit it right on the head when he said, the past is the past. Don't worry about it. The future is unannounced. We don't know. Live in the present. Being in your own space. The present is the same way we lead in the present. Reimagine a new culture. In other words, the culture is going to change. And as people start to change, we'll see this culture change. And that culture will impact the way you lead people. And cultures will begin to form in your organization. Reimagine what that culture is. Change your leadership style. Remember we talked about 20 minutes ago about being flexible? This is where that flexibility happens. Flexibility means changing your leadership style to meet the demands of the new culture, whatever that may be. Highlight success stories. I learned this from a lady by the name of Janice Arnaldi. She's a storyboard teller. She's a storyteller. People love storytelling. Highlight successes no matter how small. Continue to work on those highlights because people need to know that you care before they care about what you know. Establish direction and alignment to commitment of long-term goals. Now, those long-term goals will come from your organization, but they're probably not going to be any more than 3 months long. So your boss may say to you, this is where we want to be in November or going into the Christmas break. Is that possible? Let's work backwards from that and see if we can make it. Don't start where you are now. Don't start from from where you are. Go back to what the long-term goals might look like, or the short-term goals, whatever you want to talk about, and work backwards. Also, prepare to make adjustments along the way. Leadership is no longer about predictability. It's about making adjustments. And you may need to make 3 or 4 or 5 adjustments a day, a week. It just happens that way. And remember, when the yogurt hits the fan, not all yogurt lands on everybody equally. Mark Twain once said about a leader, some days you're the statue, some days you're the pigeon. Life just rolls that way. Nothing is more clear in a new beginning when we go through the transition piece. The nuances of the transition are going to force you to make adjustments. You're not always going to be right. Hopefully, you're not always wrong. But you need to make decisions. Having the courage to make a decision and make adjustments. And know what your organizational plans are. Stay very connected to your boss. So far, we talked about being connected to people, to the people who report to you. Make sure you stay just as connected to your boss and understanding what your boss's needs are. Don't leave the boss to the side. And if you are the boss, if it's your company, you own it, you're the entrepreneur, then you should be communicating that information down to your people to the best of your limited knowledge. When people need love and understanding the most is probably when they deserve it the least. And that's part of that nuance in terms of the new beginning. So just kind of wrapping it up and what it boils down to, because I know I only got 30 minutes, and 5 key points. It's about the leadership post-COVID. It's about the ability to lead and manage the transition, not so much the change, the transition. Facilitate communication. In other words, facilitate, you look it up in the dictionary, it says to make easy. Make the communication easy. Provide leadership and ongoing coaching to people on a regular basis. And some people are going to need more TLC than others. It's just the way it is. Plan for operational changes. We're going to be changing. Plan for it. Ensure that the changes that you're making are prudent changes. Ensure that people understand the changes and listen to what people have to say. And last but not least, be the chief empathy officer. And if you can capitalize on 2 or 3 of these, managing change for the new beginning phase will be easier. It's not going to guarantee success, but it will be easier. Oh, thank you for listening. And Abdul, I can turn it on back to you.
Nick, thank you very much. Very insightful. A number of questions that came through as you were presenting on the topic. I just made some notes here as well as I replied to my notes. All right. The information loop. You refer to the information loop. That's excellent. The conundrum that comes to mind is early versus accuracy. So the earlier that you communicate, the likelihood of your information being accurate decreases because as the situation evolves, the new information comes to light, and that might change what you would have shared prior or previously. So what would your advice be, Nick, in relation to keeping your team and others involved and keep communicating with them information. But as it pertains to early versus accuracy, so if you communicate early, there's likely to be some trade-off in terms of the accuracy of information. So how would you advise managing that?
Well, one of the things I would do is that if I'm going to communicate early, I will let my people know. The information I'm about to give you, Abdul, is subject to change. But based on what I know, this is the information that I have right now. It's ABC. Based on that, this is what we need to do moving forward. Do you have some challenges with that? You may turn around and say to me, yeah, it could change again next week. Yes, it can. It can change. But based on what I have now, you may say, well, shouldn't you tell me next week when it becomes clearer? Well, I could tell you that next week when it becomes clearer, but I thought it would be advantageous for both of us for you to know now so we could start making changes. Because you see, I'd rather know something about what's possible and what's probably highly likely and adjust it as we go rather than spring it on you next week. Because you can turn around and say, well, did you just find this out now? No, I knew it about last Monday, but I wasn't really sure if I was going to tell you about it. Right. I wanted to make sure I had more clarity. Well, that's great. So all the work I did last week is ruined.
Exactly.
There's no end. You're better off. You're better off to say it's tentative, but it's fairly accurate. And I believe there's validity to it, so I'm letting you know now. So I will sacrifice a little bit of accuracy for intent. Absolutely, I would.
Yeah, excellent. And that positioning up front to say, hey, this is subject to change. It's early, so it may change. And having that caveat in there, I think that's going to be important so that we can manage expectations of the individual part of the team. Versus, as you rightly put it out, delaying that message to later, and then that's going to potentially catch some people off guard, and that's probably not good or not great for building trust and morale around the team, obviously. Right. The downside that they may be thinking, well, you didn't trust me enough or my abilities to share that information with me. So clearly there is this may not be a good place for me potentially. So excellent point in there. The next point comes around leadership by walking around. You alluded to that earlier in your presentation. In the COVID, the concept of walking around with folks moving to working from remote locations, as much as 30% perhaps, and possibly more, that's probably not going to be very practical walking around. What would your take be in leadership challenges and opportunities in the post-COVID era when walking around isn't an option as much?
Two things. Number one, you pick up the phone and call them. And number two, you have your visual calls. One client I have has a visual call every morning at 10:30 because they're conscious of the California time, which is 3 hours, or the Vancouver time. They're conscious of the East Coast time. 10:30, we talk, or 11 o'clock. The meetings last 45 minutes. This is the agenda. The person has the agenda a day ahead of time. Now, leaders say, well, geez, that's a lot of work. I got people on site, I got people off site, but it's a heck of a lot more work if you don't do it. It's a lot more. So people do it by, if I've got something specifically to talk to you about it, I'll call you on the phone or do a separate Zoom call. But if I'm talking to, if I have 10 people, 30% are off site, I got 3 people, I want to talk about the same message. This is the message. Zoom call does it, whatever the case may be. Here's the agenda, let's talk. So it's important for me to keep people in the information loop at all times. So that's how I do it. That's how I do it with my associates now.
Excellent. Yeah. So essentially the principle of walking around is there, or it's around communication and touch points. Whether you do it around walking around the office, and if that may not be feasible as much, it's by having that touch point via phone or FaceTime or other types of calls. Excellent. So it's very much about keeping those touch points in there. Excellent. Thank you for that clarification in there. The next question and point is around change and change transition, and whether the the spectrum of quality versus quantity. At what point do you transition from the focus from let's get this complete, let's try it out so that you're comfortable with the concepts and the principles, to this needs to be done at the right quality? What that transition looks like? When do you shift and change focus from one to the other? And what's that going to do to the long-term aspirations of quality and building and striving for excellence?
Well, I think as a leader, we still have to live by the principles on spec, on time, on budget. I think that has to rule our decision-making process. But there are jobs that let's say I have a sales rep, and he or she is involved with the customer, and the customer says, no, I wanted this, and I wanted it by Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Well, by Wednesday at 10 o'clock, it's going to take me it's going to be an extra $1,000, okay? Let's keep the customer satisfied first. And let's talk about the money piece later and who did what to get us in this position. So I concentrate on the quality first, and I concentrate on the quantity second. Versus if I'm running a plant and I have a maintenance gentleman, and his job is to get the machine up and running. He say, Nick, we need a new bushing, but that bushing won't be until Friday. Well, what can we do right now to make it safe so we can run the machine, get it done? I don't need the quality right now as well as I need the runtime, the quantity. What will get us through? It's a trade-off. Okay? So that trade-off comes down to probability and consequences. The probability of something going wrong is slim and none. But if something does go wrong, the consequences are severe. What is the trade-off? And every situation needs to stand independently of previous situations. So we're always, even post-COVID, even pre-COVID, let's go back to January or February, we were still weighing quantity versus quality. It's just that we were doing it differently because we were in a different environment. That's all. And there's different things that ruled us, but we were still juggling those two pieces.
Right. Thank you very much, Nick. Well, that's all that we have time for today's Business Breeders sessions. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of those who have joined us, and also thank Nick Pollice from Pollice Management Group for taking the time out of his busy schedule for being here. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the coming days, we will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar, so I want you to keep an eye on your inbox for when this arrives. Goodman Group's professional development always strives for excellence in everything that we do. And with that belief in mind, we have limited the number of seats that are available for our nonprofit program, as you'd have heard us say about that in the past. That program is filling pretty fast. We have less than 50% of seats now available for that program. So I invite you to book your seats for that program at your earliest convenience. You'll have our contact information on the latter slides of the pack that will be coming up. Feel free to get in touch with myself or any member of the team here. We will be taking a break next week with Labor Day weekend ensue, and we will be back the week after. So that will be Wednesday the 16th of September, same time again at 11 to 11:45, when we will hear from another community partner and contributor who will be leading the session then. And that by Jackie King. I hope you can join us then. Until then, stay safe.